I, Tantus Van Dracovin, Lord and Emperor of the Dracovin Empire, and welcome. It is time to continue my discussion on the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons 5th Ed D&D. Alright everyone, when we last left off, we of course were talking about your roles. We've been diving deep into the roles that you're going to make, and we started talking about some success-failure type stuff. We'll finish up with that today, and start with exploration. Alright, so, there is an option, well, something that you should consider, that when you are making a check, when your PC is making a check, that the degree of failure makes a difference. What do I mean by degree of failure? Well, let's give some good examples here. A good example might be if a thief was trying to disarm a trap, a rogue was trying to disarm a trap, anybody really. If they should fail their check by just a bit, they can't disarm it. On the other hand, I could fail it by so much that I trigger the trap right in my face. Think of it that way. It's like when picking locks. Either you fail it, maybe you break your tools. Or it could be diplomacy. There's a lot of circumstances where the degree of failure makes a difference. So the more you fail, the worse it is. And if you feel like a check should have some kind of implementation on that with a degree of failure, go ahead. Add it in there. Say that the failure with a trap, disarming it, doesn't trigger it. Or maybe if they fail by enough, it does trigger it when failing to do it. It's up to you as a DM to feel when it's appropriate to do this, but it does add a level of interest to it. This means that I'm not just, failing. I could fail and something really bad could happen. Now, very similar to this is the natural 20, natural 1 on our D20 roll. Now, for ability checks and saves, this means nothing normally. But you can very easily, as the DM, add a little bit of flourish onto one of those ends. Effectively something that, yes, I'm succeeding in when I'm rolling this D20, but something else nice happens. Or I'm failing when I'm rolling that one, but something else bad happens. That one, it could take into account things like if I'm failing to pick a lock, let's say, and I rolled 1 to fail it. Bang, my lockpicks break. Or if I rolled a 20 in order to, search an area, maybe I find some kind of specialty hidden thing which wasn't necessarily something listed on the DM's basic information, they're just adding in there. If you're doing something like an investigation, it could be an extra clue. There's lots of things you can do with this system if you use it, and it's more, again, for flourish. It is to discern between just failure or just success. It's to add different degrees of everything. I rolled a 20 and succeeded. I succeeded really well. I rolled a 1 and failed. I failed really well. It's definitely making it that it's not so cut and dry with the success and failures. Adding all of these together make this entire band of success/failure that means the dice roll with your character's ability makes a big difference. It's more than just the succeed-failure. And that can help add flourish, excitement to your world. Now let's talk about exploration. And we're not talking about it on the player's side, we're talking about it on you, the DM side, when your characters are exploring these various areas. Now when your players are in an environment, you of course probably want a map of the environment. Why would you want a map? Because it helps you out a lot. It helps you keep track of where your players are, for one thing, so you know where they are in the world. And then it allows you to describe things for them. If your players are exploring a dungeon, you can describe the various hallways, doors, chambers, things they will encounter along the way. That gives them opportunity to understand what's around them and make choices for exploring. They can go in this room. They can go down that hall. They can check out that door. Lots of options for them. Similarly, if you have a wilderness map and you're keeping track of them, it allows you to describe things like roads, rivers, various kind of observable monuments that they might be able to understand what they are, and then make decisions to keep them on track, or to get them off track, because maybe the information you provided them is truthful, but they have the wrong information, they go that way instead of that way. Things like that. It opens up the exploration. And you do want to keep track of how much they're traveling depending on the size of the map and the pace that they're going. There's a map travel pace chart in the book that will tell you on the various map sizes the kind of travel pace you would have for them, and also so you kind of get an idea of how far you're going. You can try to figure out how far on foot they're traveling with that map size every minute, hour, or day. It is important that they do list the 3 paces here, the kind of slow, normal, and fast pace that they talk about in the player's handbook, the PHB, that we're assuming normally that, they'll figure out their pace, you got their map size, you can see how far they go. And it is very important that if they are traveling over the day, assume about 24 miles on a normal pace is about how far they can go over the course of a day. Now, your PCs will determine the pace that they will walk with, and pace, as you should remember from the PHB, does not assume base speed. We're assuming that if your PCs are traveling over the course of a pace per day, they're traveling in such a way that, it doesn't matter if this person's slower, this person's faster, there's enough breaks, pauses, things like that, that everybody generally travels around the same speed. This is assuming just walking, but there are times where you might hit other types of speeds. This is, of course, assuming walking type speeds. There are times where maybe you can use magic to travel, flying, or even some natural forces, like if you can harness the wind or waves to travel somewhere on land, which is waves is a little weird on land, but maybe if you're going over the course of a river or something. Regardless, when you begin to travel in other ways, this throws it out the window. You're not traveling at that standard pace anymore. You don't have to worry about those breaks or anything like that because you're using, some kind of flying power, some kind of magic power. And granted, the flying is an option, but magic to travel on the ground or anything like that is another type of speed. You could create a phantom steed or something like that gives you travel. If your PCs are traveling over land using one of these techniques, there are a few things you have to remember and use and take to account. So this is by magic, device, or natural forces, if you can harness for them. In 1 minute, whatever it is, magic, device, or natural forces can push you forward 10 times your speed in feet. That's it. Pretty simple. 10 times your speed in feet, that's how far that'll go in 1 minute. Over an hour, you can move a number of miles equal to your speed divided by 10. So if my speed is 30, I move 3 miles. If my speed was 30, I would have moved 300 feet in a minute. 300 feet in a minute, 3 miles in an hour. Over the course of the day, I do however many hours I've traveled in the day times that 8. Traditionally, this is 8. Hence why, because normally normal pace is 30 feet, which I've been using as an example. 3 miles times 8, 24 miles traveled in a day. If I was traveling at 60 feet over the course of that day, I would travel double that, 48 miles. But then I'm also traveling 6 miles an hour, 600 feet a minute, because the speed is different, and it can be consistent other than a pace. Now, even now, we can add a pace in, though. If you travel at a fast pace, you add a third of that. A good example was to use 30 feet. A third of 30 feet is 1 mile, so you travel 4 miles per hour, or you would travel 32 miles over the course of a day. On the other hand, if you're doing a slow pace instead of a fast pace, you're doing 2/3. Basically, rather than adding a third, you're multiplying your speed by 2/3, meaning it's 16 miles at a slow pace over a day's worth, or 2 miles over an hour, 200 feet over a minute. Now, when I'm traveling outdoors, and it's a clear, sunny day, I can see about 2 miles into the distance, as long as there's nothing obstructing it. There could be trees, mountains, hills, fortresses, any kind of structure that's big enough that you people built to block the way. Anything like that will block your view of 2 miles. But generally speaking, 2 miles, clear day with nothing blocking it. If it's raining out, you reduce that to about a mile. If it's foggy out, you reduce that to about 100 to 300 feet, depending on how foggy it is. If you manage to get up somewhere high, like a mountain hill or the top of a tower, or even if you somehow take flight for a little while, as long as you can get up high and get some distance, you're able to see about 40 miles. So you can see that, getting some height really increases that kind of looking speed. And, that 2 miles on a clear day without obstruction, pretty nice that you can see that. But when you really need to get an eye of the surroundings, get some height, get some distance. Now, when exploring, you might encounter other creatures. One group of things might encounter another group of things. And the important part about this encounter is who notices who when the situation occurs. And that can cause a lot of different things for the encounter. When we're talking about indoors, this is going to be governed by the configuration of the rooms and passageways, first and foremost. It's also going to be configured by vision. Who needs light? Who doesn't need light? If we're talking outside, then the terrain itself is going to be hampered, maybe the weather, or even the time of day, depending on if you need light or not. More often than not, when these encounters are occurring, it's because one group hears the other group rather than sees them first. It's much easier to hear them at a distance than to see them at a distance. I can be around the corner from someone else, but if I overhear them, I've noticed they're there. I don't have to see them, but I know they're there. If neither side is attempting to be stealthy, you just encounter each other basically when you could encounter each other. It's whenever we could hear or see each other, we do, right away. If I'm hearing them, more than likely you're hearing them. Oh hey, we met each other. Otherwise, if a group is trying to be stealthy, they're going to use their dex stealth checks against the passive perception of the other group. Basically trying to creep along and not be noticed. Basics that we've talked about before in the PHB. But that's it for today. So I first finished talking about the rolls you can make by talking about degrees of failure and flourishes to success or failure on 20 or 1 rolls on a d20 check, and how those can add to interesting degrees to your, success or failure. Then I started talking about exploring. Talked about your maps, talked about your overland travel, talked about seeing things, and I talked about a little bit about encountering other creatures. This is important information that you as the GM have to think in a different way than a player would think about it. A player that's got a map more likely are going to be mapping a place themselves. Or maybe they've got a general provided map where they don't know where they are exactly. You know where they are. So the player is going to react differently than you, the DM, needs to. You need that information. You need to know exactly where they are. They don't. They might have, big map of the wilderness to be like, okay, at these crossroads, we're supposed to go this way. They're at this crossroads over here, not that one. They don't know that, so they're getting lost. But you know that they are getting lost. You see? It's because there's a difference there. There's differences, and that's why we're talking about this again, though we've talked about some of it under the PHB. Yes, it's important for you as a DM to know this stuff, because this stuff just doesn't apply to players. It applies to everything you throw in your world. If you've got some enemies up in a big tower, your PCs are traveling around on a farmland, they are less than 40 miles away on a clear and sunny day, your villainous characters see the PCs and know they're coming. PCs, with their 2 miles, probably don't really notice what's going on in the tower. You see? Very important. In the next episode, though, we're going to finish talking about exploration with talking about tracking and more, and then move on to talking about social interactions. Because your PCs know about it as a D20 roll and attempting some things, but there's a lot more details to that you as the DM have to keep in mind. That's what a lot of these systems are. More complex on the DM side. Which is good because it makes it easier for the players. That's why we're talking about this. Anyway, I hope you're having a great day. If you've had any interesting circumstances when it's come to using maps with your players, and they've gone on some very interesting tangents with the information that you've given them, basically, they got lost in a really cool way, or something similar, let me know in the comments below. I love hearing these kind of stories of interesting adventures your players have had, especially when it comes to exploring. I hope you're having a great day, and until the next time, I bid you farewell.